Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of ValueCast. It's the video and podcast that we talk about service and people. Today, I'm really going to enjoy this conversation. One, because it's with Lizzie, who I've known for probably 5-6 months now. We've had lots of great conversations. And two, it's also about an area that I'm very passionate about, and I believe a lot of businesses still don't truly understand the value of. So, but before we get into the topic, I want to introduce Lizzie to you. Lizzie, feel free to give a little preamble on you, what you're doing right now, and a little bit about your background.
Well, thank you very much for the brief introduction and for having me as a guest. Very much looking forward to the conversation as well. Although when you just said 6 months, it feels like about 6 years now, Alex. So
it does, doesn't it? It does.
That's how long the conversation's been going. So I'm currently a solutions director at ValueCast Consulting, and I lead our outcome and delivery model here. What that means is we are partnering with organisations of all sizes, building and scaling teams for them with our expertise. So rather than partnering on a sort of people-based time and material solution, everything that we work on is outcome focused, and we are being paid against milestones.
Great stuff. You've worked in the sort of contingent outcome based for quite a while. Even before Ventula, haven't you? Sort of it's been
absolutely. So I started in recruitment now in 2013. So I did that traditional recruitment model up until 2018. I then moved into a managed service offering where we were actually taking full ownership of the strategic advisory components of what a managed service provider does. In 2019, I moved from London to Amsterdam, where I was working the Dutch and the German market predominantly, partnering again with large enterprises in a consulting model. So I recently came back to London in 2023, I think now. And actually it was great to see how the talent space has evolved since my time in 2019. So where I was working probably a little bit more in a silo, not many organizations were working in this way. Coming back, definitely the space has evolved. There seems like there's a lot more appetite for conversation, and certainly a willingness that if organizations are not already working in this way, the appetite is to learn a little bit more and how could that actually add value to their business.
Yeah, brilliant. And you picked on a really good point there, because I think a lot of this is around education and understanding of what models are available versus traditional methods. But what really sort of drew you to be passionate about sort of outcome-based engagements? What is it that you feel is important? Because a lot of people sort of think, it's just an SOW, it's just a different way of working. But the truth is, there's more to it than that.
Yeah, definitely. I think personal interest. So when I actually thought about the work that I was doing within a recruitment model compared to working in this model, even for myself on my side of what the line looks like, it promoted a lot more problem solving, certainly more of a strategic component to help organizations overcome pain points and challenges. So the thing that I guess has kept me motivated is really that, it's our responsibility to have high accountability compared to a model where if somebody is just needing one specific requirement, it can quite often be more aligned to, I guess, sort of the business's culture and values. The soft components are in equal measure as the skill components. Whereas what I really like in this model, that it really is skills-based, delivery-based. And I think to actually foster a very performance-based environment, it actually is more inclusive than what the traditional methods are. Consultants working in this way, they are all different ages, come from all different backgrounds, and ultimately you are wanting the best skill and the best work, rather than just, I have an idea of what that looks like, please can you go and find this individual to come in and sit amongst our team.
Yeah, it's looking at the work that's in front of you versus the person that you need. It's sort of taking a step back and actually understanding what are you actually trying to achieve here versus bringing in, because if you're bringing in a person, then bringing in a permanent employee. If you don't have budget to bring in a permanent employee, you've got a piece of work that needs to be completed. So it makes perfect sense to me why this model is growing and continues to grow. But why do you think that a lot of businesses still default to like the traditional contingent model of bringing in a worker via an agency?
I think the main piece is probably the fact that historically it's been one of the big fours that work in this way, and to actually within a model of, I guess, workforce solutions, as a service provider, you have to build trust with who your end partner is, and they have to truly believe that the model that you're working to is actually compliant. It is a truly based outcome delivery construction, and that actually the engagement is going to achieve the pain points that they're looking to overcome. So step one, I would say the biggest barrier tends to be the education piece, just that I don't necessarily know enough around this engagement model. I know that my business can very quickly bring in recruitment-based services, and actually right now that feels more secure than perhaps going to look at this type of model. I think another one tends to be, and I like to call it a bit of a myth, that if you were to work in a service-based engagement model, that it costs substantially more than actually bringing in just a contingent contractor. Now, on my side, I would like to think that actually, this hopefully provides stakeholders with a lot of clarity over performance and project scope, and really you're saving on costs. When you have a defined and set scope of work with outcomes attached to it, really the service provider is going to be holding themselves to high accountability to ensure that the project is being delivered on time and in budget. And I think also, we all know that time is also money. So when something is truly delivered at the time it's supposed to be, ultimately cost savings really do go up substantially compared to I'm bringing somebody in which perhaps feels within my more suited budget right now, in the way that I tend to always bring expertise in. But actually, this is where, the real conversation around fictitious employment happens, because you have what you call, sort of permalancers. Somebody who comes in initially on what's supposed to be a 3-month engagement, 18 to 2 years later, they're still there. Why? Because actually the parameters weren't really clearly defined. They might be, choosing a lot of different scope and work within a BAU model, and the project that they thought was the most challenging and needed delivery on is still not having been met. So I think the education piece tends to be the biggest reason of just not knowing that there are different solutions to navigate really what the pain points or the achieved outcome can sort of factor into.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what you just said there. I do, from the conversations that I'm having, the education piece is definitely something that a lot of businesses still don't fully understand, and do, at the moment still tend to look at the actual sort of job profile versus what they're trying to get from an outcome perspective. And that's not every role, right? Because there are some jobs where people are brought in for maternity cover or to cover a period, and yeah, maybe that doesn't technically suit this type of delivery model, but that's
and I'm sure you're having conversations where actually you're turning around and saying, to classify this project, actually you should bring in a PAYE worker, because you want them under instruction, you want them to be on a laptop that belongs to the business, you want them to work the same hours as your permanent team. 100%, that is, also our responsibility to say, this isn't an outcome-based role. It's going to cause you a headache to try and make it an outcome-based role. And now that we've had this conversation, absolutely continue with the process we were initially thinking would bring about higher success. However, if you're having that chat and certain, I guess, identifiers arise, sometimes it's a case of, I guess, leading them into case studies or perhaps other engagement models where you think it's going to really help them overcome and achieve the project that, it's causing the headache right now.
Definitely. It's crazy, really, because a lot of people think, that, as businesses, we're out just to get money and we're out just to, make our revenue better. But the reason why I believe we get on so well is actually, within our core, we're focused on just making sure that client knows what they're doing, and actually making sure from our thought leadership and our experiences, this model works best for you, right? Okay, if it's an outcome-based model, yeah, we can probably help you on that instance. But if it's not, that's fine. Let's guide you down the right path, and let's make sure you're actually getting the value that you need for your business. And again, I think that's also, I wanted to go back on the cost side of it as well, because when you look at the cost of bringing in someone, so if you do identify that actually everything from a role perspective can actually be delivered via outcomes, I still think that businesses struggle analyzing the cost of what the actual outcome-based model would be versus bringing someone in via a PAY temp, focus for, okay, we're going to bring you in for 3 months. We're not sure on the end outcome. We sort of know what you want to do. But do you find that when you speak to businesses that it's hard for them to decipher that sort of differentiation in cost if you take the talent and all those pieces out of it?
Yeah. Well, I think particularly with a contingent labour model, it is just normally harder to forecast. It's harder to really understand where are the gaps within the project team. If I were to bring somebody in to just simply replace a worker that has moved on, and I'm being told that, the team think it might be X amount of time to deliver on, there's no defined financial cost against that. So one of the main things that need to be done, is almost a triage component, and our conversations are around how do businesses look internally to build those processes or policies to ensure that that part is happening, and that the person that has the gap in their team that's requiring a particular expertise feels comfortable to say, okay, well, I've hit these 6 questions and I feel really comfortable that when this expertise comes in, I am simply overseeing performance and nothing else. I am only upholding the delivery of what that looks like. And my only responsibility is simply checking in and saying, are you on track? Are you on task? Can you show me a little pilot of what the project looks like? Okay, that looks great. Within six weeks, where will you be? When it's like that, you can then have internal conversations of, we're on track. So that budget and spend that has come from this pot over here, actually, that may reduce. And I believe that, whilst the estimated cost was X against a time frame of X, we're going to reduce it by 3 weeks. And I do just think it's substantially harder to do when you're, I guess, trying to forecast what a project is without taking the time to really do the triage element. And, our conversations within the business that you work in, certainly, it's a case of that really promotes and builds upon the education piece to gain clarity. And I think that's probably the main word that goes hand in hand with outcomes based delivery. It just provides that level of clarity that the gaps that you have identified can actually have a deliverable tied to it, and I know what that outcome is going to be.
Yeah, and Fantastic. And it's difficult because, you probably face, as I do, a number of sort of skeptical sort of managers or stakeholders that, they're really busy. They've just suddenly had an urgent project for on their lap. What's the quickest way for me to get someone in, right, and to actually get that work done? Well, default, I'm going to go to my tiered supply chain and off I go. But when you have those, and I think you sort of answered this a little bit, when you have those skeptical sort of stakeholders that would default, how do you ensure that you, like, what is the ticker that makes them sort of turn their mind and go, oh, actually, this might be a better way of working? Because I think that's where a lot of businesses do struggle. And I know you talked about the triage piece, but maybe fill in a few more gaps around that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, first of all, when I have a conversation with a stakeholder that might be open to working in this way, really it's because the pain point has often been, I don't have time. And if somebody doesn't have time to bring in an additional headcount and person, whether that's, in a freelance or contingent contract construction, that person still needs to be managed. Those people still need to be managed. That is then additional time for that already very busy manager. So one of the main conversations that is a really good starter is certainly, it might be time management. It could actually be that they've already been having conversations internally with HR and compliance about the fact that they have a multitude of external workers from a multitude of suppliers, and actually they're not entirely sure what the risk is and what that looks like. Sometimes if we're talking about cross-functional teams and multi-location teams, that can actually be one of the pain points, is the supplier that is delivering the external workforce actually upholding the local labour market laws. And the third one tends to be, at the moment, I've had X amount of people on site and we're still really far off delivering the project. We aren't really sure when it's going to be finished. I brought 6 people in for 6 months. I thought it would be done. And actually, it looks like I'm going to have to extend everybody for another 6 months. So if you're hearing those type of pain points, it then absolutely promotes a conversation of, okay, well, when we worked with X, they had similar pain points. When we actually thought about it and measured this against outcomes, rather than I have a problem and this is the project, you can deep dive into, okay, well, what does that look like? So for example, we've worked with a financial services client who had a backlog of a number of regulatory reports. Now, they were being required by internal and external regulators. So the challenge is, obviously we have a backlog of reports, but if you then measure that and put that into an outcomes based, it became very apparent that within the 6 weeks window, they had to create 10 regulatory reports. So then what is the service provider's responsibility? That 10 reports need to be created. The time frame is 6 weeks, and we will not be paid without it being essentially those 2 components achieved. How it's delivered, the business didn't need anybody to be sat on site and managed. Where it was delivered from, again, the same. Ours, we were only given access to systems that were really required for this project. So we weren't just given access to the entire business and all of the systems that a full-time employee would need. And it means that essentially the budget is also upheld. So what seemed like quite a complicated problem, when you actually understand and do the discovery, and it's also our responsibility too, as the service provider, to ensure that we are giving them the right engagement model as well. You come up almost with a co-creation of, okay, you're going to have to trust us and pull back the curtain. And I appreciate that, sometimes that can be sensitive, and you're not really sure where that problem is. one of our consultants will come in and be part of that gap analysis. They can help build that workflow. And that's really then when all of the, you know, pieces of the puzzles come together and you say, well, you know, the problem can be reduced and it can be put against an outcome. And this is how we'll do it. Once sign off is given, we come in, we complete it, and we offboard straight away. So it just promotes, you know, a measurable component to how you're bringing in external resource.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, you know, a lot when I listen to a lot of what you've said, you know, it rolls up to, you know, a simple word of accountability. You know, are you, you know, when you're wanting a piece of work done, do you as a manager want to take accountability for that piece of work being delivered? If that piece of work being delivered, you are wanting to take accountability from and manage those people, then maybe an outcome-based engagement isn't right. But actually, on the flip side, why do you need to take accountability? So let's stop and think about what you're trying to achieve, and let's map out those deliverables and actually give the accountability to the supplier. Don't worry about the, you know, the skills that you trust the supplier to deliver that piece of work. You agree a fixed value for that work to be done, and you expect that work to be done. And in today's world of, you know, such constraints around budgets and you know, people actually making sure that they are generating revenue from the work they're doing. I'm not talking about from a service provision perspective, but that actual business. You know, you can't afford to have scope creep from a project that it ups your value by like 15-20%. That can be quite an impact to your business. And if you put the accountability on the supply chain, you remove that risk, right? You remove that risk and make sure that the work you've actually asked to be done is being done. It's like if I'm bringing a builder into, you know, to do a loft conversion, you know, I'm not bringing them in and paying them weekly and just hoping that they're going to meet the end day. I'm actually agreeing a contract. I'm agreeing, right, well, I've got this work to be done. I expect it to be done after so long. And I have a weekly check-in and say, how's the work going? Are you on track? Yes, we're on track. You're not on track? Why aren't you on track? Well, you probably need to make sure you're on track, you know? So it's not like these things aren't done in real world. They're done in every type of industry. But yet when it comes to business sometimes, as in physically selling a laptop, doing a piece of work, we still default to that way. But you would never work that way in these other industries, would you? You know, you just wouldn't. I find it quite amusing.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I'm not going to bring, you know, I'm not going to do that basically. So no, that was great. That was a really, really good understanding of one, what you guys deliver, but also cutting through the, you know, what is a myth, because it's not as complex as you think it is, you know. And I one of the things that I continually have discussions around at the moment, Lizzie, is that when I'm speaking to some buyers, they're like, well, all I've got is a list of job descriptions. I don't know how to move those into this type of delivery model. And that's not their fault. That's just because they've never done it before. And actually assessing a job description and shifting it to an outcome-based contract is actually not that difficult, right? You just need the help, coaching and training to do it. And I'm assuming that's, you know, that's a big part of your job, and you probably see a lot of clients that have those challenges too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, my remit on the, I guess, rapport building and the education piece as to what this engagement model looks like, we have then, you know, a team of ambassadors that will sit even, you know, before an agreement is made, where they're really a part of what that gap analysis looks like and understanding really how do you prioritize right now where your problems lie, or maybe it's not even problems. This has been a great success. However, our internal team don't have the capacity right now to actually build upon that because there are so many additional projects. And actually the task at hand is we want to continue to drive this forward. So I think an outcome-based engagement, what it really can do is, first of all, tackle the exact requirements that are needed rather than trying to bring a person in and then, I guess, massage them into an area just to, I guess, sort of ensure that they're being kept busy.
Yeah.
And it just promotes a more purpose-led type of work for the expertise that's required as well. You know, I have seen a number of talented people trapped in sometimes, I guess, a broken model. And that's where businesses can see, you know, institutional knowledge not being retained, because if somebody leaves and that isn't being, you know, I guess, documented correctly, that then goes and they're back to square one. So, I mean, working in this way, you know, the accountability piece is absolutely at the core of the supplier, where it's, you know, the responsibilities are tackling the exact requirements, ensuring that there isn't project creep, making sure that everything's on time and on budget, retention of institutional knowledge, and it really is promoting an agile solution for the changing and evolving needs of what the business looks like. So, you know, very much for ourselves, it's our responsibility to quickly adapt to what is required of us. And if that then means that the team of consultants on site are no longer relevant to take the project to the next bit, then, you know, it's a case of we are replacing with then what that expertise looked like, where sometimes, you know, when you're going through the contingent model, that's then where you're looking at perhaps fairly lengthy notice periods. You may have built up a rapport where actually, you know, your brand awareness and your brand identity, you're not wanting to get rid of Dave, who's been great and fits in with the team and, you know, is very much done what he has needed to do, and perhaps it's not his fault that the project's changed, so we'll try and keep him on. And it very much gives clear and defined parameters of this is the supplier's responsibility, this is our responsibility, and the common goal is making sure that this project is delivered with successful outcomes. So that would probably be my kind of key takeaway. Key takeaway, I'd say, that actually, you know, everything is just based on performance. You know, there's sometimes we can get into the mold of where it's still people at the end of this delivering the expertise. Our, you know, a consultant that's coming in and delivering against outcome, they're not requiring perhaps the same level of maybe comfort, I guess, workplace comfort that maybe a contingent contractor would.
Yeah. I think that's all very, very relevant points. And, you know, we didn't sort of plan to sort of discuss this one, but I do think it's an important point to actually talk about, you know, the resources that are, you know, how they're wanting to do work nowadays. And I think if you look back, you know, I've been in this industry a long, long time. And if I think sort of 10, 15 years ago, from a resource perspective, the opportunities to go freelance, create your, you know, your own limited company business, or work in that type of way as part of a delivery-based outcome model, it just wasn't there. It just wasn't there at the time, and it probably was, but it just wasn't visible. But you know, there is a real shift, and I don't want to talk too much about, you know, umbrella payroll and regulations of that sort. But the fact is that more people are starting to want to actually just focus on their skill set versus focusing on wanting to be a part of that company, because they like the dynamic way of working. They like being able to, rather than work on one project and complete that bit of work and then maybe carry on working on that project, but in a different type of way. Like, no, I'm skilled in this area and I'm happy to help any business, but I want to deliver the outcomes that I want. Like, I'm seeing, you know, continually seeing more people move to that way of working, which is great, because without the people, you can't deliver this type of service. So it is partly essential.
Absolutely.
Do you see more people wanting to work this way?
So people who have honed into their skill set and have built up, you know, a bank of tools that they know they can go in and bring their expertise to the table and be paid against that actually isn't for everybody. So often what you can see is a rise in quality of delivery. So where, you know, we spoke, a few moments back, where we were talking about how do you put cost against delivery. A person who is sat at the table, has listened to really what you're hoping to achieve. They are well versed now, and at a point perhaps in their career where they will say, I anticipate, this challenge arose in this client. This is how I overcame it. This is what the cost model looked like, and it's going to take me X to achieve it. And actually, where you thought it might be 6 months, I can do it in 4 months. And it's a set individual that is happy to not do a hourly based time card, and happy to say, well, these are what my deliverables are for this week. Yes, I've achieved them, so I'll receive payment. And if I haven't achieved them, I'm aware that I'm not going to be paid until they're achieved. So it isn't for everybody. And what you can see is actually that level of agility, speed of delivery, and quality, they all start to go hand in hand, because ultimately the outcome is the sole purpose of what that skill set is required to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
really valid. But we could probably keep talking for. Sorry, I think the internet's a bit iffy, but don't worry, we'll ignore that bit. But like we've been speaking for over half an hour already. I can't quite believe that. And I think you've given some really, really valuable insights for businesses and for people watching this around why outcome based is a route that people should consider. Trying to simplify the triage, and it's not as difficult as people think. But if there was just one thing, right, that you would want companies to understand about outcome-based models, what would that one thing be? Because you've mentioned a lot today, but what would be the top priority?
Sorry, the internet, I think, actually maybe disconnected just as you asked the question. So I got the end of that, Alex, but I didn't get the beginning. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Really, it was just what sort of is the one thing when it comes to outcome-based engagements, what would you see as the top priority for businesses that you want to get across? What's the message that you want to get across to those businesses struggling to understand outcome-based engagements?
I think don't be afraid to even maybe pilot an outcome-based engagement. I understand, particularly, for sort of medium-sized businesses who maybe aren't working at the moment with, a vendor manager that is the advisor or the strategy, and it might actually be a small procurement team and a small HR team and a small legal team trying to navigate this, and they think actually there could be real success if they were to bring this into the organization, but they're not really sure how to go about it. Don't go at it alone, I would say. Seek advice, work with the right suppliers, and sometimes choose a small business area where perhaps you think actually speaking with the leaders in that team, speaking with some of the challenges, the compliance part, the risk part, and the financials that this one business unit is trying to achieve, maybe, use that as a starting point. Track the success, see what is achieved, and if actually, it has given you the return, it might be something then that you can go, either to the board or whoever you need to have that conversation with, and have a conversation about a wider rollout. I would just say that sometimes the message coming back to me is that it sounds lengthy. We'd have to change quite a number of policies, and how are we going to, I guess, guarantee the return of what you're saying? And starting small, I would just say don't be afraid to do.
Okay. Sound advice. Brilliant. And so what motivates you, Lizzie, to get up every day and enjoy work? What do you do?
Having conversations like this. Well, I think, probably my story is the same as quite a number of people that I've spoken to when you're working in the world of workforce solutions. I didn't anticipate to come into it. I didn't even know what it was back in 2013. But I have to say that I think I really enjoy sport. Outside of work, I have always enjoyed, I guess, kind of camaraderie, trying to overcome certain challenges, and it's just I think it's a method of working that for me brings about problem solving, in-depth analysis and discovery, and being able to actually see what the outcome looks like is certainly, for the thing that keeps me motivated. I like being able to track and see and continuously improve, which sometimes other structures don't actually promote that. It's more of a rigid structure compared to this, which can be, agile and scalable. And also, I have to say that I'm mainly motivated by the people around me. I think this is a business area where it's continuously evolving. I'm always learning. I'm always meeting new people, and no day is ever the same. So when somebody like myself, my personality type, all of that is being ticked. So it's definitely something that keeps me going and keeps me driving forward.
Good.
What about you? What keeps you engaged in this world?
Good. No one's ever asked me that question. That's quite nice of you to ask. Well, they obviously have, but not on this. It's the people I work with. It's making sure that whatever I'm doing is bringing value to businesses. It's not necessarily about the money. Money is important, and without my family and without exercising regularly, I struggle to motivate myself. So those two things are quite important to me at the top end of things. So yeah, it's just I just like to have fun as well. I can't be doing with a work environment where I can't enjoy myself. It's probably one of the worst things I could ever think of. So it's important to keep things fun, but we're all motivated by different things, and that's but I think that's where we align a little bit. So it's people is the main thing.
Absolutely.
Well, brilliant, Lizzie. Well, thank you ever so much for your time. I've really
Thank you for having me.
Sorry. I think we've got a slight delay on my side. It's my fault. So I apologise for my poor internet provider. They're not providing a service as they said they would, so they better replace it and bring in a new service. Going on an outcome-based perspective.
It was only towards the end of the call, so hopefully for the majority of it, you were clear on my side anyway.
Yeah. It'll all come out fine. Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much for your time, Lizzie.
Lovely.